Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leak Project. I am your host, Rex Bear, and tonight we have a real treat for you folks. We have guest Anthony Carr, one of the world's top documented psychics. Anthony Carr is the author of 2 internationally syndicated columns, Stargazer and Hands-on Destiny, 3 books, Palmistry, Hands-on Destiny, also Prophet of the End Times and Fool's Journey, an autobiography. His predictions are also published regularly in the National Enquirer and the Globe. Carr has been called, especially in light of his recent prophecies concerning Princess Diana's death and the terrorist attacks on New York and Washington, not to mention the sudden and unexpected assassinations of the madman fanatic Osama bin Laden. Mr. Carr has recently started a meetup group, meetup.com. Anthony Carr, the world's most documented psychic, where Anthony plans to do lectures and seminars on psychic-related subjects such as astrology, palmistry, heightened level of consciousness, etc. Quote, the seer without peer and the world's most documented psychic predicts future with such uncanny accuracy, many leaders in the field and observers consider Mr. Carr a modern-day Nostradamus, end quote. For more information about Anthony, the modern-day Nostradamus, check out his website, Anthony Carr, that's 2 R's, psychic.com. Anthony, real pleasure to have you on the show with us. How are you?
Well, after that, I was going to say I only feel like 50-50 today, but after that introduction, I'm more like 100%. Thank you for that. I was looking around to see who you were talking about.
Hey, bingo. I'm so happy to have you on the show. I know our listeners are going to be excited as well when they have the opportunity to listen to this. I mean, what a pleasure to have you on here to give us your predictions of what might take place this year and some of the things that you've predicted in the past. One of the first things that I wanted to ask you, Anthony, is when did you first start having these experiences, you know, being able to see into the future?
Oh, well, let me gaze into my crystal ball. Delve into as I dive down into the tunnel of time, through time and space continuum. And I see a young child lying in bed. Suddenly he jumps up in stark terror, runs to his mother and says, "Mommy, I just saw Grandpa lying in a box." And she said, "Hush, darling, you're only having a bad dream." Well, lo and behold, 3 days later, my grandfather died. He was lying in the box. I'd seen him, which was burnished light mahogany, as I recall. So that seems to me to be the first experience I had of a psychic nature that I can recall.
Now, when you had that experience, was it in a dream? Were you fully awake? Was it like a hypnotic type? Were you able to feel the, like you're actually feeling it like you were there? Or was it just visual?
No, I'm just lying there with, I think I had my hands behind my head and just beginning to doze off. As I now realize, they call that the alpha state. You're not fully under. If you're too deeply asleep, you don't receive these images, and you're what is it? You're in that REM.
Yeah.
Rapid eye movement, that stuff. Anyway, I've found over the years that if you're just ready to doze off, your body is calm, your brain isn't agitated, the brain as opposed to the mind. Quite often, that's when you're struck by a blinding flash of something, a vision, or a sensation, or a feeling. My grandmother, who missed the Titanic by 4 hours, used to hear voices. The universe would talk to her, and in the sense that the universe records everything. It's a great bundle of electrical energy, as we are, and we're part and parcel of that, because electrical energy, or the soul for the religious people, is what keeps our hearts beating, and what keeps our synapses synapsing. And people experience these things in many different ways. As I say, my old grandmother was clairaudient, and would hear things and hear future predictions in her sense inside her ear, as she used to call it. The spirits would whisper in my ear, she used to say. Personally, I get visions, sharp, clear visions, like a television screen and frozen in time, but without the subtitles. quite often they have to be interpreted exactly as to what it is I see. And sometimes a stranger could interpret, if he could see the picture, the image in my mind better than I can. So then there's, clairsentient, the old gut feeling, the good detective.
Right.
You know, I've got a gut feeling about this thing. So there's those are the three main conduits for most mammals, including our four-legged brethren, dogs, cats, horses, animal, and the bipeds, us, I guess. So there's no what's the word I'm looking for? There's no state, no alpha state. There's no sense of concentration as you might see in the movies and so on. I could be doing anything, reading a book, reading the paper. Sometimes somebody will mention something that'll trigger a flash or a feeling. Sometimes I'll see something, and that formation of clouds, that's a form of divination, whose term escapes me at the moment. Birds, avian flights of birds form patterns and shapes. That's a form of divination. Entrails, of course, chickens' entrails, that's as old as time itself. It can be anything, coffee grinds, it can be teacups, it can be cards, it can be the palms, and certain things, certain words, and certain people will trigger an image or a feeling, and that's usually what happens to me. I don't have to, the more my conscious mind, or my conscious brain is distracted, the easier it is for an image to fill that vacant spot, so to speak, no pun intended, which is controlled through the pineal gland or the third eye. And that's sort of the antenna, is what it is for us. That's why a lot of psychics look heavenward when they're looking up, because they're seeing a screen image just more or less between the eyes and just slightly above the forehead, if that makes any sense to you.
Oh, absolutely. I often wonder if that's why they put so much fluoride in the water, to kind of, bring the level of people's abilities down almost.
Do you remember when all that started? I know you're too young.
Hitler, right? Concentration camps?
Well, no, the fluoride actually here in Canada started, must be 40 years ago. And people were so upset about it, they were moving away from big cities, including Toronto, in droves. They thought it was going to destroy the human race, and it was going to do this and do that and the other. I've been drinking the tap water here for years and years, and I don't think I'm any worse the wear for it.
That's a good sign. That's a good sign.
A lot of my friends always say, they always refer to me as the psychic sax player to my face, but behind my back, I think it's more like the psycho sax player.
Hey, with the things that you see and the places that you've been and the predictions that you've made, how can you not take it all with a grain of salt and just kind of look at it now as that's probably allowed you to really evolve spiritually, I would think, hasn't it?
Well, a grain of salt. I forgot the Latin term for that. This solus umbrandi or something, which is with a grain of salt. I take everything I do more with like a boulder of salt.
Okay.
So I try not to take everything I do too seriously. I try to make light of it, because most psychics and readers and sitters, they you probably know this, but they're pretty morbid and they're pretty intense, and you don't have much of a sense of humor. I have a tendency to laugh things off. My so-called misses in my psychic cornucopia, the ones that didn't hit right on or slightly off target, it's not the prediction that was wrong. It's the person who interprets it. In this case, the human frailties of Anthony Carr or anybody else who. Well, I'll give you an example. Years and years ago, I made a prediction in the Toronto Sun about. I said, I see something that looks like a weird submarine. It's a submarine that has a huge four-blade propeller, not behind it, but in front of it. And it's kind of encased in a square screen of some kind. I said, maybe it's a new atomic submarine. I said, it seems to be going down, and then it seems to be coming up. I couldn't make head nor tail of it until they started building the tunnel. And the tunnel, of course, it was the earth remover that submarine-shaped thing that they used to drill the drill under the English Channel to France. That's what I was seeing, but I didn't know that. I didn't know that until they actually started building it years later and showed a picture of this thing on television. So quite often, psychics will see things and not really understand what it is per se until after the event. I mean, if I see something that's going to take place in New York City, like the Statue of Liberty, I see the story, I'd say, well, okay, that's New York City. But quite often, new and inventive things, some things so far in the future that we as human beings don't recognize what it could possibly be until after the fact. One of the great old-time psychic readers I wrote a book about, Carr, a prophet of the end times. His real name was Count Louis Heyman. He was a very famous Victorian astrologer, psychic. He was Irish, tall, handsome, wore a cape coat. He was kind of like Christopher Lee's Dracula, if you remember the old Hammer movies.
Oh, yeah.
And he had an affair with Mata Hari, and Rasputin tried to kill him. And when he was 47 or 50, he married a young 16-year-old aristocrat who had all kinds of money. And she outlived him by years and years. I got to know a lot about Carr, or Count Louis Heyman, through his widow. I kept up a correspondence with her, when I was just coming up. And then she introduced me and told me about the Lillian Gish, the silent screen icon. Are you familiar with Lillian Gish?
Off the top of my head, no.
Rex, well, she, I guess Mary Pickford, Lillian Gish were the two giant Hollywood silent screen goddesses of that era. And she lived to be almost 100. And she, Carr, he had taken her palm prints in 1935 to include in his book of palmistry. And I struck upon the idea of meeting her, going to New York and doing a reading for her, reading her palms and taking her palm prints to see if there was any major changes in the lines in the palms from then till, well, not now, this was back in 1984. And she was in her 90s, but she was as sharp as a tack. Her famous silent screen movie was something called Way Down East, where she's on an ice floe in the Niagara River, and it's about to go over the edge, and she dangled her hand in the river, this icy cold river, because she was on a real ice floe. And D.W. Griffith was the movie producer at the time, or W.D. Griffith. I'm dyslexic, so I get things backwards. And when I went to read her palm, and I tried to open her right hand, I couldn't budge it, because she had damaged it so severely by dangling it in the water like that. She could never open it properly after that. Huh. But anyway, she knew Carr quite well, this fellow I was telling you about. And he died in Hollywood in 1936. And I took her palm prints, and she told me all about Carr. She says, and she had heard about me even back then. And she says, in many ways, your life parallels Carr, who seemed to straddle the legitimate world with one leg and the other leg in the illegitimate world. And as I say, Rasputin, and he had an affair with Mata Hari. And he was, he's a legendary character. You know what? I've lost my train of thought. What was the question?
You were talking about Carr, and you were just getting into some of the correlations, possibly, and that, and the gal that was a part of the Gish, Lillian Gish, that was part of all those silent movies. I mean, I'm looking at on Google right now. She had over a dozen of them. She was quite famous.
I had done. Oh well, it was one of her talkies that she was in. She was active all through her life, right until the day she passed. And she was in a movie with Robert Mitchum called The Night of the Hunter. I don't know if you're familiar with that. He plays this psychopathic preacher, and he's trying to get this hidden money from these two kids whose father was executed in jail. And Lillian Gish used to take, during the Depression, would take straggling, starving children off the road and take care of them all, and so on and so forth. But anyway, Lily, when I met her, I told her that she was not through with her career. I saw her on cruise ships. I saw a great medallion around her neck. She was being awarded with something. And it turns out She did a number of appearances on The Love Boat. Do you remember The Love Boat?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And then she was recognized for her lifetime contribution to the was it the movie Arts and Sciences, the Academy Award for a lifetime achievement, and they gave her this great gold medallion around her neck. And she wrote me a beautiful letter attesting to the fact that I had predicted all this stuff. I have a palmistry book coming out, and it's called. I'm still wrestling with the title. Let me know what you think about it. One title is Hands of Destiny, which is after my column there, and the other one is. You ready for this?
Yeah.
The Book of Palms.
I like the second one more just because of the, yeah, the Book of Palms. That's good. They're both good, but I like the second one.
Well, maybe I'll use the second one and then subtitle Hands of Destiny beneath it.
There you go. Yeah, that's perfect. That's brilliant.
Well, I have read from so many people, and I've had so many documented predictions. I mean, for instance, we're talking about what triggers these premonitions and these. Anything can do it, like anything. A blade of grass, a child bouncing a ball down the street. Actually, I was watching an old movie the other night somewhere, or maybe it was at the movie theater because I love movies, and I saw a scene that took place in, I think it was Utah. It was Oregon or Utah, Astasia, and there was and you might make a record of this. There was a span bridge. You know what I mean by like the Golden Gate Bridge, a span bridge. Okay. In a town called Astasia. I don't even know if it's a real town or not. Somebody should Google that. And I had a horrible premonition of something terrible happening to that bridge in the near future, whichever place that was. So, and I can't even think of the name of. Is there, unless you use the fictitious name, but use the real bridge. The bridge was real. It was Astasia.
How would you spell that? I'm looking it up right now on Google as we're talking about this.
Astasia, Astasia, IA.
Okay, Astasia, Utah. Let's see if anything comes. There's an Astasia Steakhouse. Let me keep on looking at this for a minute while we're discussing this, because I'll do some looking in the background here.
I jotted it down on a piece of paper and I had such a strong premonition about an explosion, a fire, and all around this span bridge. It might be my fault. I'll check it out when I'll give it to Justin and send to you. You can keep it as a documentation. Because
I know Utah pretty well. I mean, I've been to every single corner of that state, and I'm trying to think of something that correlates with that name. As far as Oregon, I don't know that area as well. So very interesting. Utah?
What about Oregon? Did you look in Oregon for
let me do that right now. I've heard of there's a place out there. There's a beach area out there, Estonia, which is out there, Oregon and Washington coast. I've actually been there. That's by Cannon Beach, where they filmed the movie Goonies, actually, and that's in Oregon.
How do you spell that?
Estonia, Oregon. Yeah.
With an A?
I'm sorry, Astoria. It's Astoria, Oregon.
Astoria, that's it.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm looking at the bridge right now from that area. I'm looking at a picture right now. Folks, be prepared if this is a prophecy being made right here live with Anthony and here at the Leak Project. I'm looking at the picture of this bridge right now, and it's just as you described it.
What's the history of this place? What's the land? Is it earthquake country? Is there any history to it or that area or any, I wonder.
I'm sure there is. It's a beautiful area. I mean, it's a great place to visit and vacation, and if you have the opportunity to live out there, if you can handle the northwest rain, then you'd absolutely love it. It's a beautiful place.
Is it what the body of water it spans? Is that close to the ocean? Is it a river? What is that?
Yep, from Oregon to Washington. That's what the bridge is doing. It's taking you right there. You're right on coast. You're on Highway 101, and then you go from Astoria to McGowan.
So the bridge spans, 2 states? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it sure does. It goes from Oregon to Washington State, and it's approximately 2-mile long bridge.
So Washington, how far is Seattle from there?
Okay, Seattle is going to be a few hours. Let's see here. If we were to go from Astoria, Oregon to Seattle, Washington, that's going to be a 3-hour drive.
Well, just remember that I see flames could be possibly a small plane crash or a plane crash on it, near it, around it. Something goes blowy like that. And the plane almost looks like a white. The outer coat of it is white. The tail is sticking up. The head of the plane is pointing downward around that bridge, the water. So that could be the reason for the fire or so on.
When did you first have this vision?
I was watching a movie. I mean, as you and I were discussing, anything can trigger a premonition. And I was watching a movie that was shot there, and it clicked in, and may have been at a theater recently. I can't remember. It was only just a few days ago, and it kept sticking in my mind. The span bridge in Astoria, as you said, and it just realized that something terrible is going to happen around that bridge.
Wow, that's remarkable. Hopefully, if there is something that's going to happen out there, there can be some type of, diversion tactic. Now, let me ask you this too: with these Akashic go ahead.
I know what you're going to ask me.
Okay, great.
Like, can one's destiny be changed?
Exactly.
No. All roads lead to Rome. To try and change your destiny to escape, as my old granny, who had the gift, the one who missed the Titanic by 4 hours, she said, in her brogue, Scottish brogue, the harder you try to escape your destiny, laddie, the quicker you run into it. And that's true. It's be like changing seats on the Titanic. Ultimately, it's going to that one destination.
And with that said, though, however, are there alternatives? So yeah, you've got these certain places in time that you need to do because it's a part of destiny. Does that mean that every single step and move and thought and opportunity that we have in this lifetime is all predestined as well?
It is. There's Jung's collective unconscious. Basically, the same things will happen over and over again in different ways and different times and different. If you're destined to, I don't know, die in a fire, if it's not there at this place, it'll happen elsewhere. The gym where I work out, which has a 5-lane track, and they allow competitive speeding wheelchairs there for the Special Olympics. And I was jogging along the track about a week ago, and I saw this one of the racers was coming along at a really good clip, and he didn't notice me there. So I jumped out of that lane into the other lane, and I got whacked from behind by another guy on another who was coming the other way. And it doesn't matter which way I would have gone, it was going to happen. I couldn't avoid it. And that's pretty much the way it is with life in general. You cannot escape your destiny. Have you ever heard of the story in its various forms, Appointment in Sumera?
Possibly. Could you refresh my memory?
Well, let me refresh my own memory, because it's been a while since I told you. Basically, again, turn of the century, 1901-10, crooked politician in New York. He's ripped everybody off. He has, he's made his money at the backs of the poor and so on and so forth. A big blustering, cigar-smoking Irishman at the time. It happened to be Irish, could be anybody. And this horrible, haggy little old woman came up to him, and it was during New Year's Eve. And he says, "Mr. O'Hara," he says, "your death will be exactly 1 year from now." He says, "You will die at the stroke of midnight New Year's Eve next year." Right? Well, he schluffs her off and says, "Get away from me, hag," and so on. And well, of course, over the next few days, a couple of weeks, this thing really starts to bug him. Starts to play on his mind. It's driving him crazy. So, if I remember correctly, he gives up all of his worldly possessions, and he jumps a freighter, and he gets as far away from New York as he possibly can. And he gets on a camel, and somehow or other ends up in the Sahara Desert. And he's dying of thirst, and he's badly sunburnt, and he sees an oasis way off in the distance. So he plods on. He gets closer and closer, and then eventually he sees this figure in a black hooded cloak, astride a white horse, And he gets closer and he gets closer, and finally he sees that the figure looks like a man, but he can't see his face. The cloak is long and black and covering his loins and the shanks of his legs and his head. Finally he gets closer and closer. The horse turns around, and it is the face of Death. And Death in the figure also of this haggard old woman. And she says, "Good evening, Mr. O'Hara. I forgot to tell you that your appointment at the stroke of midnight, New Year's Eve, was here in Sumera." So he was destined to die no matter what happened. Only difference is, instead of New York, he ended up trying to get as far away from the bad luck or whatever. He assumed that his fate would be met or his end would come to him in New York City, and it turns out in an oasis in the middle of the Sahara. And things like that have happened to me too. People have made predictions about me, good and bad, and no matter what I did, I'll give you a good example. The company out of Vancouver who owns my intellectual, quote unquote, my intellectual property and likeness, and they do direct mail around the world. And when they called me 20 years ago, said they wanted to promote me, take me. I thought it was just a gaffe, right? And I hung up. I said, "Get lost," and slammed the phone down.
Right.
Called back, slammed the phone, right? Finally, he said, "We're serious. We're going to send you a check for $10,000 to show you our good intentions." And so, yeah, sure, slam, right? Well, next day, FedEx shows up at the door, check, 10,000. So, at any other time in my life, when I was flat broke and didn't have a nickel, or that's my favorite saying, didn't have a nickel to scratch my derriere with, and no matter how hard I tried to escape this success, I couldn't get away from it. And of course, that works also the other way with the negative stuff. So, no, I do not believe we can escape our destiny. What is written in the stars and in the sands of time will come to pass, and there's not a thing we can do to change any of it, in my opinion.
And when you say stuff like that, it makes you wonder, because there's so many horrific events that have taken place throughout the world. If you look at the Holocaust and people that were in the Soviet Union that got taken into these gulags in Siberia and worked to death. You've got these poor people in Africa that are getting macheted to death as children, and just so many horrible things that take place. It makes you wonder, if everything is predestined, well, then are these people that are doing these horrific events, are they predestined to be terrible people?
Well, don't forget, good and evil are only human concepts. The larger picture is the yin and yang of nature. You cannot have a universe that exists only solely on peace and love. You must have the violence and the aggressiveness of exploding supernovas, which then gives birth to new systems and planets and so on. I mean, even childbirth is a laborious, painful thing, both for the mother and the child. To fight to gasp your first breath of air, and you gasp and struggle to take your last gasp when we shed this mortal coil. So there's no such thing in my mind as a loving God who cares about his little creatures here. And that, I mean, to believe in that, you might as well believe in Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy and what's the other one? Oh yeah, the
Smurfs that fly over rainbows.
The which?
I said Smurfs that fly over rainbows.
Smurfs, that's right. Over the rainbow, way up high.
What? No. What do you think is our spirit essence? Do you feel that we're reincarnated, and maybe after this physical meat sack, we go into this kind of frequency-based energy source, or?
Well, as far as reincarnation, in my opinion, the jury is still out. The one thing I do believe for sure, I mean, we all need to believe in something. So there's three alternatives. One, we're dead. That's all there is to it. And if you've ever had to, I mean, the only time we worry about death and dying is when we're conscious. When we're sound asleep, I mean, deep, so you don't worry about those things. If you never woke up again, you wouldn't know the difference. Have you ever had surgery?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, where once they put that needle in your arm and you're out, that's it.
Right.
You're not, oh, gee, am I going to, if you never came back, and I've had the same thing, you wouldn't know the difference. So either that's it, you're sweet oblivion, which is not so bad. The worst part of all that is just the manner in which we take that final step from light to darkness. whether it's painful, whether you're torn to pieces by a lion or a shark or an alligator, or you die peacefully in your bed. Once that step, and then the rest of it is there's nothing really the matter. It's moot is the word I was looking for. So then you get the possibility of what I described as the electrical force. At death, I believe the spark of life withdraws from the body and then assumes its natural shape, which would be like a spark. If you threw a log on a bonfire and all those sparks go flying all over, or you see fireflies over a bog at night, that little spark contains all of our experiences, all of the images, all of your loved ones, all of the sounds you've ever experienced. And I mean, when you think about someone right now, think about a loved one who's passed on. Even if you wear glasses in your physical body, in your mind's eye, you don't need glasses. You see them, you can see him or her perfectly. You can turn him or her around in your mind, three-dimensionally, in color. You can see every outline. You can even hear the voice of if you listen intently enough. And it's pretty amazing that we can do that. And we take all that for granted. At death, all that leaves. There's no male and there's no female. I've often asked people who believe in heaven and hell. I said, how do you see yourself in heaven? Or do you see yourself as a man? Well, yeah, or a woman. I said, well, why? The genitalia is only for the purpose of reproduction. There's no need to have any of that in the spirit world or in the electrical world. So all of these images are stored into the great video factory of the universe, or the Akashic records, as the Hindus like to call it. And there, on the great wheel of destiny, it goes round and round and round, and perhaps it can come back here. It can come back to speak in metempsychosis, which is it could take any form: animal, plant, human, or a rock or a mountain, because it's all suffused. That the life force, the prana, is suffused through all eternity. So, and why would we come back here in this little speck of dust called Earth? I mean, the universe and its parallel universes is fathomless. The odds of striking back here it'd be like I don't know, like winning the Super Bowl lottery in the States.
The mega lottery. I don't know. I don't even touch that stuff.
Well, so what I'm saying is that's the other possibility. And you've heard the expression that people see at the point of death, they see their lives pass in front of them before they depart this existence, this dimension once and for all. That's because the brain has most of the electrical energy of the entire body. So wherever the preponderance of energy and electricity is, that's where it'll leave the body, probably out through the skull, because you got 1 billion brain cells there, and you got all that electrical energy, as opposed to your big toe, which doesn't have very much at all. So it rapidly goes out, passes that way, and it would unfold like a movie, and you would literally see your whole life pass before you before it disappears off into the great beyond, as it were. You see, I mean, something leaves the body, because I've often said, and I've spoken with doctors and undertakers, and I watched several people die. My father and others, and so on and so forth. Something leaves the body for sure. What causes the body to go cold? Does the flame burn out, or for the flame to burn out, the energy that supplied it would have to disappear or take off somewhere? So whatever that essence is the part of us that's immortal, I believe. See? Now, speaking of God or gods, that's another thing. A lot of these people talk about, a kind and loving God and all that stuff. Well, I am of the firm belief that the God we worshipped, and all the gods that all the different peoples revere, were, you've heard this, I've been writing about it for 50 years, but I really believe, ever since Chariots of the Gods, that was an epiphany for me. I went through the Bible time and time again, and there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that we most certainly were visited and created by star travelers from another galaxy, I really do. If you read the Bible, if you examine, for instance, the 18th Psalm, not the 23rd Psalm, the Lord is my shepherd, but the 18th Psalm talks about David is surrounded by his enemies, so he cries out to the Lord on Mount Sinai, and the Lord heard my prayer. And it starts around the 6th verse, and it says, suddenly his anger was kindled, and with a mighty blast of his nostrils, he incinerated the stones and the grass were all set on fire. So you think blast of his nostrils, what could that be? That could be the jet propulsion of the rockets getting ready to levitate. So let's say that was a UFO of some kind, or a rocket or something, and the exhaust, as in Cape Canaveral, started to burn the very ground beneath it, because that's what David describes. He says, then he rose with a mighty trembling, and the land did shake and quake. So what are you talking about here? It could be an earthquake, but I doubt it. So the whole mountain reeled and rocked. That's where Chuck Berry got his line there for reeling and rocking, right? Then it says, he ascended on a cloud of smoke. Yea, he did rise. Yea, he did rise. He was so impressed, he said it twice. So then he says, he flew on high, and he smote my enemies with arrows of lightning. So what are we talking here? Arrows of lightning? You're talking like lasers or something, right? And then I was taken up to the Lord. Well, beam me up, Scotty. I mean, that's only one indication. The angel who sat on the rock after Jesus allegedly disappeared, they describe all through the Bible an angel with the bright raiment, face that shone like the sun, his feet were like bronzed hoofs of a goat. So we're talking somebody wearing a spacesuit here. So all through the Bible, there's no doubt in my mind. Look at the book of Job. It says, the expression, people had the patience of Job. Well, for my money, Job didn't have any patience. All he did was whine and cry all through the whole book. Oy vey, how could you do this to me? Anyway, and it says, the beginning of that, it says, the Lord and Satan both met on the threshing room floor. And the Lord the devil Satan made a deal with the Lord that, I'll do all these things to Job and see if I can deter him from believing in you. Okay, he said, do what you want. He says, but don't kill him. So then the fire came down and devoured his herd of sheep and killed all his kids. And he broke out these blisters and so on and so forth. And at the end of it, it says that the Lord restored his sheep in his house, and I didn't say anything about his kids. There's no doubt in my mind that we were visited by extraterrestrials. They created us out of the lower primates, and they needed slave labor for whatever. And so we were the product or the result of that. You needed creatures that had a little bit of intelligence, not much. And so we're the result of that. And somewhere along the line, in the book of Genesis, it says the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were fair and went into them and took to each of them as they chose for their wife. So there's no doubt we got mixed up with their DNA and their genes and so on and so forth. And that's why, it's been hypothesized that some of these extraterrestrials were very blonde, very like albinos, blonde hair, blue eyes. Some were small and had funny-looking eyes. The epicanthic fold, which is the proper name for the Oriental eyes. And let's face it, the Orientals were developing roads and agriculture and mathematics, while the rest of us were still crawling around in slush and war woad, as it were, the blue dye. And so there's a very good possibility that they were first to land here and colonize Earth, as it were. So it goes on and on and on. And then the story of Noah and Melchizedek, which was the one of the sons of, Noah was, I think, one of the sons of Methuselah. And his wife gave, Methuselah supposedly lived to be, 998 years? Not bad.
Right.
I like to see what he was eating.
Yeah, monatomic gold.
Yeah. Anyway, one of his sons was the one who did not have to die, but went up to heaven.
Enoch, was it?
He did not die, for the Lord took him. I'm having a mental breakdown.
Was it Enoch?
Enoch, that's
Yeah,
the guy.
yeah, that's what. Yeah,
So did not die. He went for the Lord took him. Well, then that begs the question: what did he do? Click his heels together and just took off? So if you read the books, I don't know if you know this, but there are entire books and volumes about Enoch, the Book of Enoch, and it says right fully that he went up to Sinai. Two massive figures, about 9 feet tall, angels, escorted him back to his home, where he had a dinner with his family and said goodbye to them. And then they walked up to Sinai into a tabernacle, which ascended to heaven, and took off. So, and then there are stories about the Hebrew-looking Jewish-type fellow who was put down in the middle of China and said, "Who was the strange-looking person?" I mean, there's no doubt in my mind. Oh, so Enoch had a son. Now, what was it? Melchizedek, and was had another name, and I can't remember the name. But his wife gave birth to a child, and the child had snow white hair and pink eyes like a bunny, like an albino. And God, there's another name for his son. I'm getting burnt out here. Anyway, he went up to Sinai and he called to heaven for his son, for his father Enoch to come back. And apparently, according to the Book of Enoch, he did. And he says, "Look." He says, "My son looks like one of your gods." And then Enoch said, "Yes, God has done a wonderful thing. Your child shall be called Noah." That's it. That's where it goes from there. Now, the son who gave birth to Noah, I can't remember his name. I used to know it. Anyway, there's no. I went through the entire Bible, and I just looked at. See, there's the St. James Bible with Apocrypha. These are apocryphal books which he didn't include in the Bible because they didn't make any sense at the time. But if you look at it from modern day point of view now, the science, technology, space travel makes perfectly good sense. Now, the third possibility, as I said, the first, you're asking me what I believe in. So either we're dead, that's it, oblivion. Secondly, the spark leaves the body and ascends to heaven, the universe, whatever, and can come back here or go elsewhere. And sometimes it does come back into another human. You get people like Mozart, and you get idiot savants, which would explain why they have this genius potential, and yet you wonder where it comes from, because they're retarded in every other possible walk of life. Third possibility is we're doing experimental work with STEM work, DNA, cloning. I believe that even if we were dead in our graves for 1,000 years, that these beings are so far advanced, they could take a little piece of that dust, which contains, again, all of your DNA, all of your memory banks, everything that is you, kind of add water and mix, and poof, there you are again, born again. Not a replica, not a duplicate of you. Or
add water. I love it.
Well, I'm going to try to...
Little miracle girl there. Boom!
Well, I just...
Why not, though? I mean, it certainly makes, with the technologies that we have today versus 50 years ago, I mean, it's kind of the same thing. And the way that it's advancing and compounding quick, it's getting faster and faster. It's certainly incredible times. So I could see that.
Look at the virgin birth. Everybody laughed, including me, when we were kids. Yeah, virgin birth, right? Well, then when they started with artificial insemination, I was only a kid. I thought, you know what? That makes perfectly good sense. These extraterrestrials put her in a deep sleep, artificially inseminated her, right? To all intents and purposes, she gave birth, as a virgin, and she gave birth to a child who was of this world and also was not. So if you ask me, do I believe in Jesus? The possibility existed, but if he did, his father, God, was an extraterrestrial who created him in the womb through, as I just said, artificial insemination of some sort. Adam and Eve, look at Adam and Eve. Took the rib of Adam and created Eve. You're talking cloning here. It's gotten lost in its interpretation here in the dim, dark antiquity, but there you have it. And how about Noah's Ark? Noah's Ark, speaking of Utah, University of Utah years ago, or was it Oregon? Here we go again. They built an ark according to the specs given in the book of Leviticus, and it was such a powerful storage battery that sparks were flying off it and setting fire to everything. They had to dismantle it. So when anybody touched the ark, they died because God's anger was kindled. No, they were electrocuted. And the reason David could touch it when he did was because it probably was turned off. And David would talk to God, quote unquote, through the crown on his head, the diadem, which really originally was probably meant to be an antenna of some kind, through which he talked through the magic box to God in the mothership, if you want for better explanation. And that guy, or was that a city in ancient Samaria? Anyway, or Syria. Anyway, when it went to fall off the cart, as the oxen were carrying it into the new temple that David had built, he grabbed it, and of course he died. He was electrocuted. And that's the reason why all the priests, whenever they attended the ark, they had to be bound and girded in a certain kind of metal, which was either gold or that was resistant to electrical shock. One of Moses's, try saying that fast 10 times. One of Moses's, what was his right hand's man name? The book of, because Moses could not cross the river Jordan because he struck a rock and water came out. What that has to do with anything, I'm not certain. But Joshua, the book of Joshua went across the Jordan and into the land of the Hittites and the Huthites and these Tites and Hertites, I don't know, but they all ended in tights in those days. And and he went into to do battle, and the Lord said to smote the enemies, the Hittites, completely and take over the land of milk and honey. And Joshua says, the Lord went above us, went above our heads, ahead of us, and dropped 100-weight stones and killed the Amalekites by the hundreds than we could by the sword. Now, what were they dropping on them? Bombs of some sort, no doubt. So it goes on and on and on and on. So either we're raised from the dead on the day of judgment, whatever that is, and they will just clone, and not because you're a good guy or bad, it'll be a culling process. They'll take, I don't know, the healthiest, certain types of, like breeding cattle or something, and they could raise the dead, you personally as you, because it says in the book, I think the book of Revelation, you will know yourself and you will know your friends and loved ones as you did. So takes me back to Genesis, I think, with Abraham when he went into Sodom and Gomorrah, and he wrestled with the Lord all night and defeated him. Whatever, so it had to be one of these extraterrestrials. And then he says, "If I find 50 honest, righteous men, will you spare Sodom and Gomorrah?" He said, "Well, I will if you can find 50." Well, then he started haggling with them. Well, how about 40? How about 30?
Right.
So anyway, he went in, disappeared into the city. I'm not sure whatever happened to Abraham, but Lot came out. Lot came out with his wife and family, and they were all told not to look back. Well, then they walked up to rise, and she stopped at the hill and turned around and looked, and she was turned into a pillar of salt. Well, Zechariah, the late Zechariah Sitchin, who was an expert in ancient Hebrew languages, and he said that the ancient word, the Hebrew word for salt, was vapor. So if Sodom and Gomorrah was completely destroyed by 2 nuclear bombs, she would have been vaporized because she didn't get over the crest in time where the others did. So they avoided the heat blast or whatever, from the thermal nuclear blast of Sodom and Gomorrah. And they've done testing, carbon testing on the sand around where they figured Sodom and Gomorrah existed. And it's the same crystallized glazed sand as they found in Hiroshima and Nagasaki when they dropped the bomb there.
I've heard about that, and there's also a lot of other possibilities of nuclear warfare from several thousand years ago. I'm really glad you brought up Zechariah Sitchin, because if you look at some of the Sumerian tablets and translations that he put together, just fascinating, and I think that it might explain what science can't as far as this jump of not necessarily human consciousness, but just the difference of the old caveman versus what we are today. So, yeah.
The missing link. There is no missing link because they're the missing link, the star travelers. That's why this Lucy, that skeleton they found is supposed to be BS. There's no missing link. We went from people say, what do I believe in? Do you believe in evolution or do you believe in creation? Creation. It's both. We evolved to a certain degree and then we were interfered with, and that's how we arrived at where we are today.
I said missing link. That's basically what I'm saying is I feel that is it right there. And that explains why, there was this jump there. And we had Gerald Clark on the show the other day. I mean, this guy is just an encyclopedia of knowledge when it comes to the Anunnaki and these ancient names that many people called gods. He's able to put a name to a specific Anunnaki being that was around. It's very fascinating.
You ever call the Anunnaki, the Anunnaki, the word for those who came from the heavens. The natives Now, it's another thing. You look at these old cave drawings, and you see, like, pictures of using dye and sand and mud, a perfect replication of a deer. Then there's another one of a bear, right? And trees and then you see what looks like a very primitive drawing or childlike drawing of a human being. It looks like a guy in a diving suit. And so how could they draw such perfect pictures of deers and animals and so on, and yet they can't draw? Well, because they drew what they saw, which was a guy in a spacesuit. That's what they saw.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's the cave paintings. They've got those ones in France that are dated to be over 20,000 years old of these flying saucers and spacemen looking people that they put on there. It's incredible.
Well, I mean, absolutely. And I believe they're coming back. And when they do, there will be the religion as we know it now will not exist, because all the world will look at them in terrifying wonder and say, this is what we were worshiping. Only they all had different names. Jehovah. Well, look at the living, breathing God who traveled with the Jews from Egypt, right? I mean, you could not go into the tent at night. It was lit up in a huge orange kind of color, which was fire, obviously, or a light. They had to prepare the burnt offering in a special way. You will take the best parts of a calf or a lamb or a goat, and you will put the waste outside the tent of worship and bring in for the odor. This is in Leviticus too. For the odor is pleasing to the Lord. You will take grain, you will take wheat, and you will put for the odor. Now, the odor is pleasing to the Lord. It sounds like the old hippie days. He's getting high on burnt meat. Hey, snort, snort. To me, the Jews were the first. What do you call it? The first kosher cooks for the Star Trek. Now, again, getting back to Moses, the book of Joshua. No, wait a minute. Moses had a brother. What was his name? I forgot. He had 4 sons. They were to attend the Ark of the Covenant and the burnt offering in the tent of worship. They had to be dressed again in certain metals and certain, before they approached the altar. So and put the meat on or whatever it was they were offering the Lord. He must have been on the other side of the altar. So one of them wasn't properly attired. He took a censer with fire in it, and he went and waved it in front of whatever the temple, and he dropped dead. And he wondered again what happened. The anger of the Lord was there. He was electrocuted. Whatever it is that cooked the food must have been some kind of electrical micro oven or something like that. And then whatever it was, it killed him because he wasn't properly attired. See, so there's no doubt in my mind that the Jews called the Lord God, Jehovah. We call him God. The others call it Vishnu, and the Shiva, the destroyer, and Allah, whatever you want to call it. Trouble is, whenever something good or bad happens to us, we say it's the will of God or the will of Allah. We should not confuse the modus operandi of the universe. When as they say, everything is predestined. The planets have sway over everything we say and do, and the universe and the cosmos. So when they make a favorable aspect, means the universe is in a happy place and you have a good life, or when it's not, you have a very bad period in your life. It's because the universe is not very happy at the moment. So don't confuse good and evil. Those are human concepts with the yin and yang of the universe. If you have a great 20 years, it's because the planets are in the right place. But if everything changes, then you'll have a bad 20 years or something like that, and there's nothing you can do about it except ride it out. So, but not. We have a tendency then to say, "Oh, God bless me," because no, it's the planets are in the right place. Unless you want to, the diehards, I always tell them, well, perhaps the planets are God's way of keeping time, gauging time for the human race when this planet hits this planet, if you want to go that way, but not to confuse the extraterrestrials who landed here and will come back again. And I always say to my Jewish friends, I says, don't be in such a big hurry for the Messiah to come here. I says, it's not going to favor you over anybody else. It's going to be a culling process. It won't, not unlike H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. I said, the only thing, they may hunt us the same as we hunt animals for food. I think the only thing that would save us, because of all the poisons we ingest in our bodies and take in, is they'll have a rubber stamp that they'll stamp on their derriers saying unfit for alien consumption.
Yeah, right. We could put enough stuff in our food, like some type of nanotech, to where if they tried to eat us, it would give them. Yeah, that's a good idea. Nope, can't eat us. Sorry, guys. Maybe that's why they're spraying all the chemtrails, so that we're not going to be good food for them. They're going to have to find steaks somewhere else.
Well, anyway, Mr. Bear, did I mention to you that I'll be playing at a place called the Black Bear Pub?
Oh, yes, you did. That's fantastic. What a cool synchronicity. And where's that at?
That's here in Toronto. That's well, for Torontonians, Victoria Park and O'Connor, 1125 O'Connor Drive, which is Victoria Park in Eglinton, and that's on the 21st, next Thursday. And it's R&B, jazz. The food's great, small little intimate place. And then the 23rd will be, which is Saturday. We're at a place called, the guy's name is George. So naturally, what do you think the name of his bar is? His restaurant? It's called Georgie Porgies.
That's perfect.
And that's the 23rd. So anyway, I assume that I assume that we'll have to wrap this up because I do have to go and play a gig in about a half an hour.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, we can do
Yeah.
this another time. This has been fun.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, Anthony. I really appreciate you letting me pick your brain and giving us your knowledge. And yeah, hopefully we'll have the opportunity to speak again sometime.
As long as you don't pick my nose.
Hey, I'll stay away from there. Man, you're quick. I gotta watch what I say around you, man.
What's that expression? You can pick. How's it go? You pick your friends. How did that go?
Pick your friends, but you can't pick your family. That
No,
one?
pick your friend. You can pick your You can't pick your family, but you can pick your friends. But you can't pick your friend's nose.
Stay away from that. Yeah, will do. And don't say broadcast, folks. If you ever have the opportunity to speak with Anthony, keep that to yourself.
I grew up. Don't forget, I'm a product of my times and the people I grew up with. If you look on my website, I guess I should give out the website.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's what is it? Anthony Carr Psychic, or Psychic as I like to pronounce it, Psychic. So anthonycarrpsychic.com. My email is info@anthonycarrpsychic.com. I guess that. Oh, so on the links on the home page, if you go across, you come to a link that says gangster stories or mob stories. So they all talk like this, like that. My godfather was, and hey, let's go and pick up those brats. So it kind of rubbed off on me. With all due respect to the young ladies out there in your audience.
Absolutely. And one more real quick question before you go. Who's going to win the election this year?
I don't care who wins, just as long as it isn't Trump.
Well, have you had a prophecy or a prediction?
Well, 10 years ago, I'd written in my usual book of Stargazer predictions, which, by the way, your listeners can subscribe to our... I'll have to ask my techie guy here, Justin De Silva. It says on my website, he says you can subscribe to my book or for my book. Listen, I still use an old typewriter, a manual one. It's not even electric.
Beautiful.
But anyway, I said something about. I said back then. I said Hillary Clinton will be the first woman president. Not that I have any bias for or against her anyway or other. I also had mentioned a black president back then who would come from the dark place once, twice, thrice before becoming president of the United States. That was way before Obama showed up on the scene, but he and his forebears did make 3 moves. Once originally, I guess, from Africa, then to Hawaii, and the father and the mother before they settled in the States, or something to that degree. I can't remember. It's in my. If you look hard enough, you'll find it in my on my website, and then all my books fulfill predictions. Trump. If you vote for Trump, you might as well vote for Adolf Hitler. I mean, I got no use for. I'll tell you something. You'll probably think it sounds like it's envy or jealousy, and it isn't. I have no use for people who were born with a silver spoon in their mouths. He claims he's a self-made man. Well, if he's a self-made man, he quit before the job was done. I mean, his father gave him $1 million, then took him around to all his banker friends and got him a $35 million loan. I mean, how is that being a self-made man? And not just in the United States. We got a fellow here, Conrad Black, whose father left him $50 million. I'm a self-made man. I got news for you. These fellows, and that goes for our prime minister too, by the way, Prime Minister Trudeau. born with the silver spoon in his mouth. Let me tell you something about that. They may, and they do, have the big cars, the limousines, the Rolls Royce, the money, the status, the women, all of that. But you know something? You'll never fully appreciate it. And you know why?
They didn't earn it?
Exactly. They will never know what it's like to come right up from dirt poor, dire poverty and, with all due modesty, reach the pinnacles of world success and achievement in many ways, not just money, but even in my own minor way, what I've come from and where I've been. I'd never thought in a billion years that I could ever do anything like that. Mind you, I had help from the universe, as we all do here and there. We all need help to some degree. But no one appreciates a good steak dinner more than I, when I went through so much of my childhood eating, cheap hamburger and quite often just mashed potatoes for dinner when we were so poor. I mean, they will never know that, and they can never appreciate what they have because they've never experienced the other side of that, you see. So I have and you just want to believe if Trump puts up, he's talking about building a wall between the United States and Mexico, you just know whose construction company is going to be building it, don't we?
That's a really good point. And I think that he's more of an actor anyway. I don't think that he ever really thought he was going to become president. I feel as if all those guys at that level are just kind of, like the WWE characters. They hate each other on the video, but then behind the scenes they're drinking together and, eating hors d'oeuvres. I don't know.
I voted for our mayor here who just passed away, Rob Ford. Rob Ford, I don't know if you know much about him. He was quite the character. Mayor Ford. He was on the Jimmy Kimmel show there a couple of years ago. And he's a real character. I voted for him for the same reason I would have voted for Trump as mayor, not for anything as serious as the president. But the only thing you're ever going to get for your vote, let's face it, has any politician ever made any difference in your life, whether you liked him or you didn't? The only thing you're ever going to get for your vote is a good laugh. If you vote for a politician who gives you a good laugh, then by all means, that's all you're going to get, right?
Right.
I voted for both mayors of Toronto, Rob Ford, the late, and prior to that was Mel Lastman, because I knew they would cause all kinds of. You talk about Schlemiel. Both these guys were the Schlemiel and what's the other one? The Schlemazel. That's right. The Schlemiel, like the goof, the Schlemazel, that which they caused.
Wow.
All you're ever going to get that's all you'll ever get of any politician, right? So if I look at Trump, yes, he's very entertaining, but if anybody seriously would vote him for president of the United States, man, you must have been taught by Helen Keller. I'm telling you, take a good look and listen. And let me tell you, he talks about punching, I punched that guy in the mouth. If I punched him, that guy has never even been in a fist fight in his life. He wouldn't know how to throw a punch. His life depended on it. He probably just pay somebody to do it. And look at Vietnam. Look what he knocked. Who was the prisoner of war there? Senator
McCain.
McCain. He's no hero. He's a prisoner. Are you kidding? This guy's IQ comes in a room temperature. I'm telling you, when it comes to politics and discretion, how could you possibly say? And listen to this. This from a guy who bought himself a deferment out of Vietnam. But he's going to be quick to send everybody else's kids to war. Not that I disagree with some of his policies. Not that I disagree with some about the terrorists and all that, for sure. We need to weed them out because the war is going to be here. You got to root them right out, and you got to get right to the crux. They should legislate a law that allows the army, the police to go into, read the police use? What's that expression? We have reasonable cause. Just cause, and see what kind of stash they got in their houses and homes and so on. That I really do believe. But I made a prediction here about Donald Trump. It says Donald Trump invests millions in a fertilizer factory that uses cow dung as its main ingredient, making him the first, you ready for this? Entrepreneur.
Perfect. Man, I'll tell you.
On that happy note, I'll leave. Anyway, I don't know who's going to be, but whoever it is, I already stuck my neck out with Hillary, so I guess I'll have to stay with that. I don't even know how she's doing in the ratings there.
You know, I mean, she's definitely the Democratic frontrunner if you look at the supposed statistics from the brain drain media. But, you know, who knows what's going to happen. I definitely think she's going to be the one that makes it in office just because I feel like she's playing by the book as far as the people that have helped get her there and have funded her campaigns, etc. I think that she's kind of playing their game. So she'll probably be the next president, in my opinion, as well. But I didn't mean to keep you here longer. I know you got another gig going on. So it was just great to speak with you.
But what about Saunders? How's he doing?
He's doing okay. He's not doing real good. As far as what they just came out with, though, and said it doesn't matter what we vote anyway because the Congress is going to decide who gets, you know, enough delegates to make it in anyway. So they basically said, once again, it doesn't matter what we think, the people.
How old is he? He looks pretty feeble. I think that's what would turn people off.
Yeah.
How old is he?
I don't know. That's a good question. I'd have to look that up.
Yeah. Well, look, my friend, it's been a blast, and thank you for having me on. And of course, that's an Irish expression for putting a joke over on someone. Ah, you're having me on. But anyway, thanks for having me on your show, and I'll certainly be looking forward to doing this again at some point, perhaps when Hillary wins.
I'm certainly looking forward to talking to you again, Anthony. Thank you, folks, for listening to the show. Check out Anthony's website, AnthonyCarrPsychic.com. AnthonyCarrPsychic.com. Thank you, folks. Be the change you want to see, and have a fantastic evening. Good night. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leak Project. I am your host, Rex Bear, and tonight we have a real treat for you folks. We have guest Anthony Carr, one of the world's top documented psychics. Anthony Carr is the author of 2 internationally syndicated columns, Stargazer and Hands-on Destiny, 3 books, Palmistry, Hands-on Destiny, also Prophet of the End Times and Fool's Journey, an autobiography. His predictions are also published regularly in the National Enquirer and the Globe. Carr has been called, especially in light of his recent prophecies concerning Princess Diana's death and the terrorist attacks on New York and Washington, not to mention the sudden and unexpected assassinations of the madman fanatic Osama bin Laden. Mr. Carr has recently started a meetup group, meetup.com. Anthony Carr, the world's most documented psychic, where Anthony plans to do lectures and seminars on psychic-related subjects such as astrology, palmistry, heightened level of consciousness, etc. Quote, the seer without peer and the world's most documented psychic predicts future with such uncanny accuracy, many leaders in the field and observers consider Mr. Carr a modern-day Nostradamus, end quote. For more information about Anthony, the modern-day Nostradamus, check out his website, Anthony Carr, that's 2 R's, psychic.com. Anthony, real pleasure to have you on the show with us. How are you?
Well, after that, I was going to say I only feel like 50-50 today, but after that introduction, I'm more like 100%. Thank you for that. I was looking around to see who you were talking about.
Hey, bingo. I'm so happy to have you on the show. I know our listeners are going to be excited as well when they have the opportunity to listen to this. I mean, what a pleasure to have you on here to give us your predictions of what might take place this year and some of the things that you've predicted in the past. One of the first things that I wanted to ask you, Anthony, is when did you first start having these experiences, you know, being able to see into the future?
Oh, well, let me gaze into my crystal ball. Delve into as I dive down into the tunnel of time, through time and space continuum. And I see a young child lying in bed. Suddenly he jumps up in stark terror, runs to his mother and says, "Mommy, I just saw Grandpa lying in a box." And she said, "Hush, darling, you're only having a bad dream." Well, lo and behold, 3 days later, my grandfather died. He was lying in the box I had seen him, which was burnished light mahogany, as I recall. So that seems to me to be the first experience I had of a psychic nature that I can recall.
Now, when you had that experience, was it in a dream? Were you fully awake? Was it like a hypnotic type? Were you able to feel like you're actually feeling it like you were there? Or was it just visual?
No, I'm just lying there with I think I had my hands behind my head, and just beginning to doze off. As I now realize, they call that the alpha state. You're not fully under. If you're too deeply asleep, you don't receive these images, and you're what is it? You're in that REM,
Yeah.
rapid eye movement,
Hmm.
that stuff. Anyway, I've found over the years that if you're just ready to doze off, your body is calm, your brain isn't agitated, the brain as opposed to the mind. Quite often, that's when you're struck by a blinding flash of something, a vision, or a sensation, or a feeling. Um, my grandmother, who missed the Titanic by 4 hours, used to hear voices. The universe would talk to her, and in the sense that the universe records everything. It's a great bundle of electrical energy, as we are, and we're part and parcel of that, because electrical energy, or the soul for the religious people, is what keeps our hearts beating, and what keeps our synapses synapsing. And people experience these things in many different ways. As I say, my old grandmother was clairaudient, and would hear things and hear future predictions in her sense inside her ear, as she used to call it. The spirits would whisper in my ear, she used to say. Personally, I get visions, sharp, clear visions, like a television screen and frozen in time, but without the subtitles. Quite often, they have to be interpreted exactly as to what it is I see, and sometimes a stranger could interpret, if he could see the picture, the image in my mind better than I can. So then there's clairsentient, the old gut feeling, the good detective.
Right.
I've got a gut feeling about this thing. So there's those are the three main conduits for most mammals, including our four-legged brethren, dogs, cats, horses, animal, and the bipeds, us, I guess. So there's no what's the word I'm looking for? There's no state, no alpha state. There's no sense of concentration as you might see in the movies and so on. I could be doing anything, reading a book, reading the paper. Sometimes somebody will mention something that'll trigger a flash or a feeling. Sometimes I'll see something, and that formation of clouds, that's a form of divination, whose term escapes me at the moment. Birds, avian flights of birds form patterns and shapes. That's a form of divination. Entrails, of course, chickens' entrails, that's as old as time itself. It can be anything. Coffee grinds, it can be teacups, it can be cards, it can be the palms, and certain things, certain words, and certain people will trigger an image or a feeling, and that's usually what happens to me. I don't have to. The more my conscious mind, or my conscious brain is distracted, the easier it is for an image to fill that vacant spot, so to speak. No pun intended. Which is controlled through the pineal gland, or the third eye, and that's sort of the antenna, is what it is for us. That's why a lot of psychics look heavenward when they're looking up, because they're seeing a screen image just more or less between the eyes, and just slightly above the forehead. If that makes any sense to you.
Oh, absolutely. I often wonder if that's why they put so much fluoride in the water, to kind of, bring the level of people's abilities down almost.
Do you remember when all that started? I know you're too young.
Hitler, right? Concentration camps?
Well, no, the fluoride actually here in Canada started, must be 40 years ago. And people were so upset about it, they were moving away from big cities, including Toronto, in droves. They thought it was going to destroy the human race, and it was going to do this and do that and the other. I've been drinking the tap water here for years and years, and I don't think I'm any worse the wear for it.
That's a good sign. That's a good sign.
A lot of my friends always say, they always refer to me as the psychic sax player to my face, but behind my back, I think it's more like the psycho sax player.
Hey, with the things that you see, and the places that you've been and the predictions that you've made, how can you not take it all with a grain of salt and just kind of look at it now as that's probably allowed you to really evolve spiritually, I would think, hasn't it?
Well, a grain of salt. I forgot the Latin term for that. This solus on grande or something, which is with a grain of salt. I take everything I do more with like a boulder of salt.
Okay.
So I don't. I try not to take everything I do too seriously. I try to make light of it because most psychics and readers and sitters, they you probably know this, but they're pretty morbid and they're pretty intense, and you don't have much of a sense of humor. I have a tendency to laugh things off. Um, my so-called misses in my psychic cornucopia, the ones that didn't hit right on or slightly off target. That's just it's not the prediction that was wrong. It's the person who interprets it. In this case, the human frailties of Anthony Carr or anybody else who. Well, I'll give you an example. Years and years ago, I made a prediction in the Toronto Sun about. I said I see something that looks like a weird submarine. It's a submarine that has a huge four-blade propeller, not behind it, but in front of it. And it's kind of encased in a square screen of some kind. I said, maybe it's a new atomic submarine. I said, it seems to be going down.